Because the Milgram experiment proved that most people will follow orders even when it goes against everything they believe. But it also proves something else, that 15% won't. 15% will stop, will question, will disobey. Be part of that 15%, starting today, starting now. Stop following commands that don't serve you. Stop seeking permission you don't need. Stop trading your life for someone else's agenda. Commandeer your own life instead of being commanded. That's the choice. That's what separates men who build empires from men who build someone else's empire with their labor. The disobedience starts now. Subscribe to Rage Refined if you haven't already, because this channel is where men come to break their programming, to see through the commands, to stop being controlled by systems designed to exploit them, to become part of the 15% who actually own their lives. You just learned why 85% of men are still obeying low-value commands. You learned the exact mechanism of obedience. You learned the protocol for breaking free. Now you execute. And tomorrow you practice your first strategic no. Someone makes a request. You evaluate it. It doesn't serve you. You say no. No explanation, no apology, just no. And you notice what happens. You notice that you survive, that the world doesn't end, that disobedience is possible. And this week, you take the first concrete step toward building autonomous income. Maybe you research a skill worth developing. Maybe you start a side project. Maybe you have the conversation about starting a business. But you take one tangible step away from complete dependence on employment. So you're making a choice right now. Even if you don't consciously decide, you're deciding. Inaction is a decision to stay obedient. Delay is a decision to stay compliant. Every moment you spend not starting the disobedience protocol is a moment you're choosing to remain in the 85%. So here's what happens next. You close this video and you take immediate action. Not tomorrow, not Monday, right now. You open a document and you start your commitment audit. Every obligation you have written down. Then you evaluate each one honestly. Did I choose this consciously, or am I doing this out of obedience? And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Every time you follow a command you didn't evaluate consciously, you'll feel it. Every time you say yes when you should say no, you'll know you're choosing compliance over autonomy. Every time you defer to authority without questioning, you'll recognize the pattern. And that awareness creates discomfort, because now you know you're choosing obedience. It's not happening to you. You're actively selecting it, and that makes it harder to maintain, which is good, because that discomfort is what motivates change. So they've made obedience comfortable and disobedience painful. They've normalized compliance and stigmatized autonomy. They've created entire structures to keep you following orders. And those structures work on most people, but they don't have to work on you. You can see the game now. You can see the commands for what they are. You can see that the safety of obedience is an illusion and the risk of autonomy is actually the safer bet long term. Or you can do nothing. You can tell yourself you'll start later. You can decide the timing isn't right. You can find reasons why this doesn't apply to you. And you can stay exactly where you are, following exactly the same commands, getting exactly the same results. Here's what you need to understand. The system is designed to keep you obedient. Your employer benefits from your obedience. Consumer companies benefit from your obedience. Social institutions benefit from your obedience. They don't want you to break free. They don't want you to become autonomous. They want you compliant, predictable, controllable. Why? Because disobedience requires courage that most men don't have. It requires accepting social isolation. It requires tolerating uncertainty. It requires facing your inadequacy. It requires giving up the comfort of blame. And most men would rather stay stuck with excuses than break free and own their results. But you have the opportunity to be different. Right now, today. You can start the disobedience protocol immediately. You can audit your commitments tonight and start cutting what doesn't serve you. You can practice saying no tomorrow to the first request that comes in. You can question the norms you're following automatically. You can develop authority immunity starting with your next interaction. You can take the first step toward building autonomous income this week, because knowing all this changes nothing unless you act on it. You can agree with everything you just heard and still do nothing. You can understand intellectually that obedience is keeping you stuck and still choose comfort. You can see the path to autonomy clearly and still choose to stay where you are. Most men will make that choice. They'll consume this content, feel temporarily enlightened, and then go right back to following orders. They'll show up to the job they hate on Monday. They'll say yes to the requests they should decline. They'll follow the social scripts they know don't work. They'll stay obedient. Section 7, the choice you're making right now. So here's where we are. You now understand that 85% of men are operating in obedience mode. You understand the 5 low-value commands they're following. You understand why obedience feels safer than autonomy. You understand the disobedience protocol. You understand the costs. And you understand what life looks like for the 15% who broke free. And now you're at a decision point. If their current city doesn't have the opportunities they need, they move. If their social circle isn't supportive of their mission, they change it. If their information diet is making them weak, they change what they consume. Obedient men accept whatever environment they're in. They adapt to it. Autonomous men shape their environment to support their goals. They understand their products of their inputs, so they control their inputs carefully. Obedient men spend on comfort, new car, nice apartment, entertainment. Consumption that feels good temporarily, but builds nothing. Autonomous men spend on growth, courses, coaching, equipment, experiences that compound over time. This creates an ever-widening gap. Obedient men stay at roughly the same capability level for decades. Autonomous men are constantly improving, and eventually they're operating at completely different levels. 7, they choose their environment deliberately. They understand that environment shapes behavior. So they're strategic about who they're around, where they live, what information they consume. This makes them seem harsh to obedient people, but it makes them respected by everyone because people know where they stand. There's no ambiguity. There's no testing the boundaries. The boundaries are clear and enforced. Obedient men have weak boundaries because they've been taught that boundaries are rude. Autonomous men have strong boundaries because they understand that boundaries are how you protect your capacity to build. 6th, they invest in capability over comfort. When they have extra money, they don't spend it on consumption. They invest it in skills, tools, knowledge, relationships that increase their capability. They're always upgrading themselves. Obedient men follow proven paths. They wait for certainty before acting. They do extensive research to minimize risk. Autonomous men act quickly, fail fast, adjust based on feedback. They understand that experimentation is how you find what works. This makes them adaptable. When circumstances change, they adjust. When approaches stop working, they try different approaches. They're not rigidly attached to one way of doing things. They're pragmatic. Whatever works, works. 5th, they enforce boundaries without explanation. They're clear about what they will and won't accept. And when someone crosses a boundary, they enforce consequences immediately. No warnings, no second chances, just clear enforcement. This is completely opposite to the obedient model. Obedient men trade more time for more money. Autonomous men build better systems to generate more money with less time. Different game entirely. 4th, they experiment constantly. They don't assume the standard way is the best way. They test different approaches. They try unconventional strategies. They're comfortable being wrong because each failure teaches them something. 3rd, they build assets instead of trading time. They understand that employment is trading time for money, and time is their most limited resource. So they focus on building things that generate value without requiring their constant presence. This might be businesses that can operate without them, investments that generate passive income, intellectual property that pays royalties, systems that create value automatically. They're always thinking, how do I create more value with less time input? This means they often make choices that seem strange to others. They might quit high-paying jobs to start businesses. They might move to different cities for opportunities. They might end relationships that aren't serving them. They might pursue paths that have no precedent. And when people question these choices, they don't defend them. They don't need others to understand. They've evaluated the decisions strategically, and they're confident in their reasoning. Other people's approval is irrelevant. They guard their time ruthlessly. They say no to most requests. They cut conversations that aren't valuable. They eliminate activities that don't serve them. Their default answer to new obligations is no, unless there's a compelling reason to say yes. Second, they make decisions based on strategy, not approval. When they're evaluating options, they don't ask, "What will people think?" They ask, "What serves my mission? What moves me toward my goals? What creates the most leverage?" First, they own their time completely. They don't ask permission to structure their day. They don't accept other people's schedules as mandatory. They design their time around their priorities, and everything else accommodates. This doesn't mean they don't have commitments, but their commitments are chosen consciously, not accepted automatically. If they're in a meeting, it's because that meeting serves their mission, not because meetings are what you do. If they're working specific hours, it's because that schedule optimizes their productivity, not because someone told them to be there. When you compare those costs honestly, disobedience becomes the obvious choice. Temporary pain and uncertainty in exchange for the possibility of building something meaningful. That's the trade, and men who actually want freedom take it. Section 6, the 15%. What autonomous men actually do. So what does life look like on the other side? What do the 15% who broke their obedience programming actually do differently? How do they operate? How do they make decisions? How do they navigate a world designed to keep them compliant? These costs are real. Disobedience isn't free. Breaking your programming is painful. Most men look at these costs and decide obedience is easier. They go back to following orders. They accept the comfort of compliance. But you need to ask yourself, what's the cost of staying obedient? What's the cost of never building what you're capable of building? What's the cost of getting to the end of your life and realizing you spent it following someone else's script? This is ego death. It's confronting the gap between your self-image and your actual competence. Most men avoid this by staying obedient. They keep their potential theoretical. They never test themselves. But here's what you gain: real growth. When you face your inadequacy, you can address it. You can develop the skills you're missing. You can close the gap between who you are and who you need to be. Obedient men stay stagnant. Autonomous men grow because they're constantly confronting their edges. But here's what you gain: self-respect. You're living according to your own values instead of performing for other people's approval. You're building what you want to build instead of what you're told to build. And that self-respect is worth more than all the understanding in the world. Fifth cost, facing your inadequacy. When you stop obeying and start building autonomously, you discover your actual capabilities. And they might not be as strong as you hoped. You might fail. You might discover you need to develop skills you don't have. You might realize you're not as naturally talented as you thought. Fourth cost, being misunderstood. Most people won't understand what you're doing. They'll think you're being irresponsible. They'll think you're having a crisis. They'll think you're being selfish or reckless. They'll project their fears onto your choices, and you can't fully explain it to them because they're still in obedience mode. They still believe following orders is the responsible path. They haven't seen what you've seen about how the system actually works. So they'll misunderstand, misjudge, and sometimes actively discourage you. Third cost, constant uncertainty. When you're following orders, the path is clear. Do this, then this, then this. But when you're autonomous, you're navigating without a map. You're making it up as you go. You're constantly uncertain whether you're making the right moves. This is mentally exhausting. Your brain craves certainty. And autonomy means accepting that certainty is an illusion and learning to operate effectively despite uncertainty. But here's what you gain: Real confidence. Not the fake confidence that comes from following a script someone else wrote, but real confidence that comes from making your own decisions, learning from your own mistakes, and proving to yourself that you can navigate complexity without someone telling you what to do. Second cost, financial instability. When you leave the standard path, when you quit following the employment command, when you start building your own thing, income becomes unpredictable. There's no guaranteed paycheck. There's no steady climb. There's risk. You might make less money initially. You might struggle. You might have months where you can't pay all your bills. This is terrifying for men who've been programmed to value security above all else. But here's what you gain. Unlimited upside. When you're trading time for money in someone else's system, your income is capped. But when you're building your own assets, your income is only limited by your capability and effort. The instability is temporary. The potential is permanent. First cost, social isolation. When you stop obeying social norms, when you start setting boundaries, when you prioritize your mission over other people's comfort, you lose people. Friends who were comfortable with the obedient version of you won't like the autonomous version. Family members who expected compliance will be disappointed. Colleagues who relied on your agreeableness will call you difficult. This hurts. Human beings need connection. And watching relationships deteriorate because you stop being who people wanted you to be is painful. But here's what you gain. Authentic relationships with people who respect your autonomy. The people who stay are the people who can handle the real you. The people who leave were only there for the obedient version anyway. This takes time. You probably can't quit your job today, but you can start building. You can start creating income streams that don't require submission. And as those streams grow, your need to obey diminishes until eventually you're completely autonomous. Section 5, the cost of disobedience. Now let's be honest about what this costs, because breaking obedience programming isn't free. There are real consequences, and you need to know what you're signing up for before you start this path. Step 5, build autonomous income. This is the foundation of real freedom. As long as you depend on someone else for your income, you're subject to their commands. They can tell you when to work, where to work, how to work, and you obey because you need the money. But when you build income that doesn't depend on obedience, you become ungovernable. When you have a business, investments, skills that generate value independently, nobody can command you. You make decisions based on what serves you, not based on what keeps your paycheck coming. So you develop immunity. When someone in a position of authority gives you direction, you don't automatically obey. You evaluate. You ask, does this serve me? Does this align with my mission? Is this person qualified to direct my life? And then you decide consciously whether to follow their direction or not. This doesn't mean being disrespectful. You can disagree with authority figures professionally. You can decline their direction politely, but you stop treating their words as orders you must follow. You reclaim your agency. Step 4, develop authority immunity. This is the most important step. You need to stop automatically deferring to authority. Just because someone has a title, a degree, a position, doesn't mean they know what's best for you. Your boss doesn't know what's best for your career. Your parents don't know what's best for your life. Society doesn't know what's best for your happiness. They have opinions based on their values, their experiences, their limitations. But their opinions aren't commands unless you treat them as commands. But what if the norms are wrong? What if the standard path doesn't lead where you want to go? What if the way everyone does it is exactly why everyone gets the same mediocre results? So you question everything. You ask, why am I doing this? Who benefits from me doing this? Sure, is there a better way? What would I do if I wasn't worried about what people think? And then you experiment. You try different approaches. You test unconventional strategies. You stop doing things just because everyone else does them. You become a scientist of your own life instead of an obedient follower of social norms. Start small. Say no to the next request that doesn't align with your priorities. Notice what happens. Notice that the world doesn't end. Notice that people adjust. Notice that the sky doesn't fall, and then keep doing it. Keep practicing no until it becomes natural instead of terrifying. Step 3, question every norm. You're going to start examining the social scripts you're following. Why do you work the hours you work? Because that's what's expected. Why do you spend money the way you spend it? Because that's what everyone does. Why do you pursue the goals you pursue? Because that's what success is supposed to look like. Step 2, practice strategic no. You're going to start saying no to requests that don't serve you. Not with explanation, not with apology, just no. I'm not available. That doesn't work for me. I'm focused on other priorities. This is difficult for obedient men. You've been programmed to say yes, to be helpful, to be accommodating. Saying no feels wrong, it feels rude, it feels like you're letting people down. But here's what you need to understand. Every time you say yes to something that doesn't serve you, you're saying no to something that does. Every time you accept someone else's agenda, you're rejecting your own. Strategic no isn't selfish, it's protective. It's how you guard your capacity to build. Everything in the second category gets questioned. Does this actually serve me? Does this move me toward my goals? Does this align with my values? Or am I doing this out of obedience, out of obligation, out of automatic compliance? And then you start cutting. You quit the commitments that don't serve you. You stop showing up to things out of obligation. You stop saying yes automatically. You stop letting other people's expectations direct your schedule. This feels harsh. People will be disappointed. They'll call you selfish. They'll try to guilt you back into compliance. But you hold firm because your time and energy are your most valuable resources, and you're done giving them away to low-value commands. Step 1, audit every commitment. You're going to make a list of every obligation you have, every recurring meeting, every regular activity, every role you're playing, every expectation people have of you. Write them all down. Then you're going to ask one question about each one. Did I consciously choose this, or am I doing this because I was commanded to? Most of your commitments fall into the second category. You're doing them because someone told you to, because they're expected, because you've always done them. Not because you evaluated them and decided they serve your mission. But it's a trap, because the safety is an illusion. You're trading real freedom for fake security. You're trading your potential for comfort. You're trading your life for approval. And by the time you realize what you've given up, decades have passed, and the opportunity to build something meaningful is gone. Section 4, the disobedience protocol. Breaking your programming. So how do you break free? How do you stop being one of the 85% who obey and become one of the 15% who command their own lives? You follow the disobedience protocol. 5 specific steps that reprogram your automatic obedience and install autonomous decision-making. So men stay obedient. They keep following orders. They keep blaming the system. They keep their potential theoretical so they never have to face the possibility that they might not be extraordinary after all. This is the comfort of obedience. Diffused responsibility, social approval, cognitive ease, protected ego. It feels safer. It feels more certain. It feels like you're doing what you're supposed to do. 4th, obedience delays facing your inadequacy. As long as you're following someone else's plan, you don't have to confront whether you're actually capable of succeeding on your own terms. You can maintain the belief that you could do great things if you wanted to. You're just choosing the responsible path instead. But autonomy forces you to find out. When you stop following orders and start building your own thing, you discover your actual capabilities. And there's a risk you'll discover you're not as capable as you thought. That's terrifying. But autonomy requires constant decision-making, constant evaluation, constant strategic thinking. What should I do? Is this the right move? What are the consequences? You're navigating without a map. You're building without a blueprint. Your brain is working much harder. Most men avoid this cognitive load. They prefer the ease of following instructions to the difficulty of creating their own path. So they obey, and they tell themselves they're just being practical. This social pressure is enormous. Human beings are tribal. We're wired to seek belonging, and breaking obedience patterns means risking exile from your tribe. Most men aren't willing to pay that price, so they stay obedient, stay approved of, stay safe within the group. Third, obedience is cognitively easier. Following orders doesn't require much thinking. Someone tells you what to do, you do it. The path is laid out, the decisions are made for you. You're operating on autopilot. Second, obedience provides social approval. When you follow the standard path, people understand what you're doing. Your family is proud. Your friends relate to your experience. Society nods approvingly. You fit in. You belong. You're doing what good men are supposed to do. But autonomy creates social friction. When you leave the corporate job to start a business, people question your judgment. When you prioritize your mission over relationships, people call you selfish. When you set boundaries that make others uncomfortable, people call you difficult. When you pursue unconventional goals, people project their fears onto you. This protects your ego. It's more comfortable to believe you followed bad orders than to believe you wasted years of your life on the wrong path. It's easier to blame the system than to accept that you had agency all along and you chose submission. But here's what autonomy requires: full responsibility. When you stop obeying commands and start making your own decisions, you can't blame anyone else if things don't work. If your business fails, it's your decisions that failed. If your unconventional path doesn't work out, it's your choices that didn't work out. You own all of it. Most men can't handle this. They'd rather obey and have someone to blame than choose autonomy and own their results. So they stay in obedience mode and call it responsibility. Section 3. Why obedience feels safer than autonomy. So if these commands are keeping you stuck, why do you keep following them? Why is it so hard to break the obedience pattern? Because obedience feels safer than autonomy. And your brain is wired to choose safety over freedom every time. Here's what happens psychologically when you obey. First, you diffuse responsibility. When you're following orders, you can tell yourself that the outcome isn't fully your fault. If your life isn't working, well, you did what you were supposed to do. You followed the script. You obeyed the rules. It's not your fault the system failed you. But you obey this command. You wait. You prepare. You ask. You hesitate. And meanwhile, men who don't seek permission are building, launching, succeeding. They're not smarter than you. They're not more capable. They're just disobedient. They stopped waiting for someone to tell them they could. These 5 commands are controlling your life right now. And until you recognize them as commands instead of accepting them as reality, you'll keep obeying them. You'll keep trading your life for someone else's profit. You'll keep staying small to keep others comfortable. You'll keep following paths that lead nowhere. You'll keep numbing instead of solving. You'll keep waiting instead of building. 5th command. Wait for permission to pursue what you actually want. You've been commanded to seek approval before taking action, to make sure everyone's okay with your decisions, to get credentials before claiming expertise, to wait until you're ready before starting, to ask if it's okay before doing what you want with your own life. This keeps you stuck forever, because permission never comes. The perfect time never arrives. You'll never feel completely ready. And the people you're seeking permission from have their own agendas that don't include your success. This command serves the people selling you things. It doesn't serve you, because consumption doesn't solve problems. It just numbs you temporarily while the problems compound. But you obey anyway. You come home from a job you hate, and you consume entertainment to forget about it instead of building an exit strategy. You're stressed about money, so you buy things to feel better instead of changing how you generate income. You're frustrated with your life, so you scroll to escape instead of doing the uncomfortable work of transformation. The command is, stay numb, stay comfortable, stay consuming, and you're obeying it. Yet you obey the command to follow the standard path, because deviating feels risky. Because you've been taught that unconventional equals irresponsible. Because everyone around you is following the same path, and questioning it would mean questioning everything. Fourth command, consume your stress away instead of solving the problems, creating the stress. You've been commanded to manage stress through consumption. When you're stressed, buy something. When you're unhappy, watch something. When you're frustrated, eat something. When you're overwhelmed, drink something. Third command, follow the standard path to success even though it doesn't lead to success anymore. Education, career, marriage, house, kids, retirement. You've been commanded to follow this sequence, to measure your life by these milestones, to feel like you're behind if you haven't checked these boxes. But this path was designed for a different economy, a different world. The men who are actually winning are not following this path. They're building businesses while you're climbing corporate ladders. They're creating assets while you're accumulating liabilities. They're designing lives while you're following scripts. This keeps you powerless, because power requires boundaries. It requires saying no. It requires making people uncomfortable sometimes. It requires standing for something even when others don't like it. But you've been taught that these behaviors are negative, that assertive men are aggressive, that men with boundaries are difficult. So you suppress yourself, you bite your tongue, you accept disrespect because confronting it would create tension. You let people waste your time because saying no would seem rude. You stay agreeable and you wonder why nobody takes you seriously. And you obey, not because it's working for you. Look at your bank account. Look at your stress levels. Look at how much of your life belongs to you versus how much belongs to your employer. But you obey anyway because you've been commanded to, and you've been taught that disobedience means failure. Second command, stay agreeable and likable even when it costs you respect. You've been commanded to be nice, to avoid conflict, to make people comfortable, to suppress your opinions if they might offend, to smile and nod even when you disagree, to prioritize being liked over being respected. Think about it. You wake up when they tell you to wake up. You go where they tell you to go. You do what they tell you to do. You ask permission to take time off. You wait for them to decide if you deserve a raise. Your time, your energy, your best hours, all given to someone else's agenda. And in return, they give you just enough to survive, but never enough to be free. This is by design. The system needs obedient workers. It needs people who will trade their lives for paychecks. It needs you to believe that this is the only way, that entrepreneurship is too risky, that building your own thing is irresponsible, that security means submission. Section 2, the 5 low-value commands you're obeying right now. Let's get specific. Let's identify the exact low-value commands that are controlling your life right now. The orders you're following automatically without questioning whether they serve you. First command, trade your time for money in a system that keeps you poor. You've been commanded to get a job, work 40+ hours per week, accept whatever salary they offer, and call it success. This is the primary obedience command of modern society. But look at where that's gotten you. Are you where you want to be? Are you building what you want to build? Are you living how you want to live? Or are you working a job that drains you, following a path someone else chose, living a life that feels like it belongs to someone else? The Milgram Experiment proves something you need to understand. Most people will follow authority even when it contradicts their own interests, even when it causes them pain, even when it's obviously wrong. And if you're not consciously resisting this programming, you're one of those people. These aren't explicit commands with someone in a white coat giving you direct orders. They're subtler, but they're just as powerful, and you're obeying them just as automatically as Milgram's subjects obeyed the experimenter. You're living according to someone else's script, following someone else's rules, building someone else's dream, and here's the brutal part. You probably don't even realize you're doing it because obedience has been normalized. It's been reframed as responsibility, as maturity, as being a team player. You've been taught that following orders is what good men do, that questioning authority is disrespectful, that going your own way is selfish, and that programming overrode everything. It overrode their values. It overrode their judgment. It overrode their empathy. They became agents of someone else's will instead of acting on their own conscience. Now think about your life. How many times per day are you taking orders that don't serve you? Your boss tells you to work late on something that doesn't matter. You do it. Society tells you to buy things you don't need to impress people you don't like. You do it. Your family tells you to pursue a safe career instead of your actual ambition. You do it. And 65% of people went all the way to 450 volts. Even when they were sweating, shaking, expressing extreme distress. Even when they could hear the learner screaming. Even when every moral instinct told them to stop, they obeyed the authority figure. Now here's what most people miss. This wasn't about people being sadistic. The subjects weren't enjoying it. They were suffering too. They didn't want to hurt anyone, but they obeyed anyway. Why? Because they'd been programmed since childhood to defer to authority, to follow orders, to trust that people in positions of power know what's best. The learner, the actor, was in another room. As the shocks increased, he would react. First discomfort, then pain, then screaming, then pounding on the wall, then silence as if he'd passed out or worse. But here's the critical part. Whenever the teacher hesitated, whenever they expressed concern, the experimenter, the authority figure in the white coat, would give simple commands. Please continue. The experiment requires that you continue. You have no other choice. You must go on. Here's the setup. Subjects were told they were participating in a study about learning and memory. They were assigned the role of teacher. Another person, actually an actor, was assigned the role of learner. The teacher's job was to administer electric shocks to the learner every time they made a mistake. The shocks started at 15 volts and increased by 15 volts with each mistake, going all the way up to 450 volts, which was labeled as dangerous. Section 1, the Milgram Experiment, what it really proved. Let's start with what actually happened in Milgram's experiment, because most people know the surface story, but they miss the deeper implications. They miss how perfectly it explains why your life looks the way it does right now. And nothing has changed. Right now, 85% of men are still operating in obedience mode. They're taking orders from authorities who don't have their best interests at heart. They're following social scripts that guarantee mediocrity. They're saying yes when they should say no, and they're staying silent when they should speak up. In the next hour, I'm going to show you exactly how this obedience programming works, why it's keeping you broke and powerless, and the specific protocol for breaking free and becoming one of the 15% who actually command their own lives. In 1961, a psychologist named Stanley Milgram proved something terrifying about human nature. He proved that ordinary people will follow orders even when those orders contradict their own values, even when those orders cause obvious harm, even when every fiber of their being tells them to stop. 65% of his subjects followed orders all the way to what they believed was lethal levels. They obeyed authority even when it meant becoming complicit in something terrible. You think you're independent. You think you make your own decisions. You think you're living life on your terms. But the truth is, you're obeying commands all day long. Commands from bosses who don't respect you. Commands from social norms that keep you small. Commands from people who have no business directing your life. And the worst part, you're doing it automatically without even questioning whether these commands serve you.